What if I told you that this year's Ferrari could be convicted from the design itself? What Lewis Hamilton detected such a serious failure that Cavallino ambitions could have completely changed for 2025? Stay, because what you just filtered changes everything you thought about Ferrari and its new era with the 7-time world champion. This moment was crucial because, unlike other pilots, Hamilton was not limited to reporting what happened and moving forward. He demanded a deeper investigation. His champion smell led him to question areas of the car that were not even under review at that time. He asked about the suspension, for the geometry of the chassis, for the coherence of the management system. And when a Hamilton-caliber pilot interrupts a test session to talk about sensations of instability and lack of response, engineers have no option. They must listen to it. The disturbing thing is that Ferrari, far from reacting urgently, tried to contain communicational damage. They minimized the incident. They labeled it as a simple caution. But internally, a series of technical meetings began that revealed an uncomfortable reality. The SF-25, far from being a safe evolution of the car of the previous year, showed structural failures in key systems that were not yet completely integrated. And the most alarming was that these failures were not detected through telemetry or test banks. Only a pilot with Hamilton's specific sensitivity could perceive them. This was, in fact, Lewis's first great contribution to the Ferrari project. Not a podium, not a victory, but a warning. One that, if ignored, could have condemned the entire season before the first race. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the box changed. The sessions were no longer just configuration adjustments. They were live autopsies of a car that was under suspicion. And while the chronometer said one thing, Hamilton's eyes said another. What seemed to be another day in Bahrain became the beginning of the biggest technical problem that Ferrari has faced in recent years. The paradox is bitter. While the world celebrated the start of a new era with one of the most laureate pilots in history wearing red, in the back room of the garage, a silent battle was fought to save a car that, without having yet run, already showed signs of structural collapse. What initially seemed a lower imperfection in the behavior of the car ended up revealing one of the best-kept and most dangerous secrets of the SF-25, a structural failure in the assisted steering system. It is not a broken piece or an erroneous calibration. It is a design failure. A deeply embedded error in the heart of the interface between the pilot and the machine. The type of error that does not show in the data, but that feels in the palm of the hands, in the tense forearm, at that moment in which a pilot needs absolute precision and the steering wheel responds with uncertainty. The direction assisted in Formula One is designed to soften the resistance of the steering wheel under extreme loads. In high-speed curves, when G-forces reach brutal levels, this system allows pilots to maintain control without compromising their sensitivity. But in SF-25, what should be an aid became a silent enemy. The steering wheel does not clearly convey what happens between tires and asphalt. The car reacts with a small delay, and that delay is lethal when fighting for hundredths in classification. Charles Leclerc, known for his surgical precision, was the first to give the alarm publicly. He described the sensation as something very strange that manifests mostly in high-speed sections, making everything more difficult. His words were carefully measured. But those who know the language of paddock understood the background. The car is not reliable. Hamilton confirmed it from his side of the garage. He, who has piloted some of the most refined cars in the recent history of Formula One, immediately detected the lack of naturalness in direction feedback. For him, this disconnection is not just frustrating, it is unacceptable. A car that does not talk to your pilot cannot be tuned, it cannot be dominated. It becomes an unpredictable beast. The failure is especially critical in sections such as Maggots, Beckett's and Silverstone, or in the first sector of Suzuka, areas where the return time is defined. In those sections, trust is the only thing that separates a magical return from a catastrophic error. But with a steering system that does not respond as it should, not even the most talented pilots can take the car to the limit consistently. The most alarming thing is that this fault is not something that can be solved simply replacing a component. It requires a complete review of the design of the assistance system, its calibration, and perhaps even of the mass distribution of the car, which conflicts with the technical and regulatory limits of the regulation of 2025. The most paradoxical is that the car in data does not seem to be so bad. In simulators and telemetry, everything fits, but reality on the track says something else. And that is where the seriousness of the problem lies. The SF-25 is betraying the pilot in the only place where you cannot lie, in the curve, under pressure, when there is no room for error. If there is a part of the SF-25 that deserves the structural failure label, it is undoubtedly the rear suspension. What was going to be one of the key improvements for the 2025 season, ended up becoming the true car heel of the car. This suspension, developed and approved in mid-2024 next to a completely new gearbox, sought to offer greater adjustment flexibility and a better tensile response. But in practice, it has turned out to be a system too soft, unable to maintain a stable platform in high dynamic load situations. This technical decision, far from granting an advantage, has generated a waterfall of negative consequences that directly affect Ferrari's competitiveness. In the race, the SF-25 suffers visibly when it is loaded with fuel. The phenomenon that engineers call squat, the sinking of the rear train during acceleration, is much more pronounced than expected. This causes the rear of the car to touch the ground more frequently, quickly wearing the skate under the flat bottom, a critical part to maintain the minimum regulatory height. This not only compromises aerodynamic performance, but also places the car at risk of technical disqualification by exceeding the wear limits allowed by the FIA. The immediate consequence of this problem is that Ferrari has been forced to raise the height of the car in the race, a decision that impacts fully on aerodynamic efficiency. A higher car loses load in the diffuser, reduces soil efficiency and increases the drag, which translates into slower times and less stability in rapid curves. In other words, the only viable solution in the short term is to run with a suboptimal car to avoid worse consequences. It is a commitment that condemns the performance before the traffic lights are even extinguished. Lewis Hamilton clearly expressed him to his technical environment. The car never finds balance in career conditions. And it's not just a matter of sensations. Telemetry confirms that SF-25 has balance variations along the return more pronounced than its rivals. The car begins by subverting and ends up flying. This instability translates into irregular wear of the tires, lack of consistency in long stints and difficulties in following the pace in recent laps. And while engineers have tried to mitigate the problem with stabilizing bar settings and different dock settings, the results have been marginal. The problem is rooted in the kinematics itself of the suspension system. The trajectories described by the wheel when compressed and extended are not optimal, and that directly affects traction, dynamic comfort, and the ability to absorb potholes or pianos. All this leads to a gloomy stage for Ferrari. The car that should be an evolution of the SF-24 has become an engineering nightmare. And the most worrying thing is that these limitations not only affect the present, but also condition the development of the 2026 car. A season that, with these bases, runs the risk of starting with the left foot from the wind tunnel. The consequences of these technical failures have not taken long to demonstrate on the track, and have done so with a hard force to hide. What for other teams have been simple set-up errors or corrigable strategic failures, for Ferrari has been the reflection of a structural fragility that goes beyond the circumstantial. In the first two great awards of the 2025 season, the Ferrari fall has not only measured in points, but in confidence, rhythm, and competitive reliability. What should be a confirmation of the qualitative jump with the arrival of Lewis Hamilton has ended up being a painful warning about what is really happening inside the red garage. Hamilton, meanwhile, showed flashes of speed in classification, approaching at times the Leclerc reference. However, the lack of traction in the exit of slow curves and insecurity by attacking curbs committed their ability to advance. In a circuit where the DRS can make a difference, the SF-25 lacked the necessary grip to stay in the area of a second consistency. The result? Whole turns trapped in traffic, unable to exploit your talent in clean air conditions. And while rival teams refine each millimeter of their concepts with surgical improvements, Ferrari seems forced to patch their structural errors with temporary solutions. A career against the clock that, to continue like this, could condemn not only this season, but even affect the development of the 2026 car. The result has been a deeply frustrating experience for someone who knows what it means to compete with a perfectly balanced machine. The SF-25 not only has failures, it has failures that cannot be corrected during a race weekend. And that's what hits him most psychologically. Every time a session ends and reviews the data, you find the confirmation of something that you have already felt on the track. That a car is unable to transform its input into real performance. This technical disconnection feeds the doubt, and the doubt is pure poison for a pilot of his caliber. But the impact does not remain alone in the emotional plane. On a technical level, Hamilton has begun to get more deeply involved in design discussions, questioning structural decisions taken during the car's development phase. He has requested specific simulations, has promoted set-up changes that seek to compensate for chronic rear suspension defects and the management system. It has become a critical voice within the team, not with the aim of pointing out guilty, but to push the team towards a more radical redesign for the second half of the year. This process has been exhausting. Lewis is not only competing against his rivals on the track, but against the limitations of a machine that, in many ways, slows it more than enhances. Leave me on comments you think about it.